an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. Chapters 14 and 15. Wylan and Matthias. In these chapters, Wylan had internalized a lot of the horrific things that his father said to him. So he needed an extra little bit of motivation to get him really, truly on Kaz's side. And that motivation takes the form of his mysteriously actually alive mother. Super weird. How did that happen? Oh, right, because his father's a fucking monster. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Huge thanks to Jill for commissioning this episode. I am really happy about how consistent I've been able to read this particular book because it's such an intricate plot a lot of the time that it's easy to lose the thread. Like, I can remember main plot points and stuff, but then there'll be little details that I've sort of forgotten about. And I have really been enjoying getting through this one as quickly as I am. So this chapter, we don't really get a lot of POV of Wylan in general. I'd say Wylan shows, granted, we're getting POVs from 5 different characters, right? We've got Inej, Kaz, Nina, Wylan, Matthias, and Jesper. And in each part so far this book, we have gotten almost even coverage from every POV in each part except for Wylan. We haven't seen him since part 1, chapter 2. So he's really just not somebody that we are with too often. I mean, he's very young. He's a little inexperienced. I won't say that he's a plot device because that's really not true. He's definitely a full character, and he's definitely, like, his involvement because of his father's connection to everything gives a much more interesting dimension than would otherwise be there. But there is a feeling of the author kind of, I don't want to say not being as interested in Wylan as she is in the other characters, but maybe it's more that the other characters are more experienced with the barrel and with being criminals. And Wylan is new to this, and I would say that probably the method that Bardugo is employing here is basically being like, I'm going to have this kid more represent the observation of somebody who is new, who's like an apprentice coming into this sort of like world for the first time and finding out as they go along how much more is involved in this life than what they initially thought. Like, I'm sure it's true of really anything, honestly, but when you first think, oh yeah, maybe that's a path that I can take, when you're as young as Wylan is, there's always a sort of overly simplistic view. And once you start to get to know the people who are involved in whatever it is that you're starting to pursue, and once you realize that, like, I have always assigned most people in this line of work a certain personality trait. And maybe I'm realizing now I am seeing that so many of them have the same or similar personality traits because of the fact that they are all experiencing the same terrible betrayals or things like that, right? Like, for example, when I got involved at first in technical theater in college, all of my teachers were really hard-edged, unmovable, kind of aloof, and generally sort of had this sense to them, like there's often a a fantasy of going to college and finding a professor who will sort of mentor you and take you under their wing. And there was never any indication of that from any professor, not just towards me, but there was a few very rare exceptions. And it was always really obvious that that was due to a personality lineup, that somebody else who was also very talented, but also very aloof, and that would attract their attention. And I've started to realize that, like, with the fullness of time, part of the reason that a lot of those professors behaved that way was because they knew the students were not going to make it, a lot of them. I dropped out after 1 year because I was just like, oh God, I do not want this for my life. This is so not me. And in general, it is an accepted percentage that only about 30% of this freshman class winds up actually graduating, because the whole program is so rigid and so difficult that people really start to rethink whether they want to do it or fail. You know, they do want to do it, but they aren't able to actually keep up. And so the teachers sort of held themselves apart because they did not want to get attached emotionally to students that they were not confident were going to be there the next year. And also they needed to be a little harsh in order to really try and get us to believe that this was going to be as tough as they said it was going to be. And they were trying in some ways to do us a favor. And I feel like Wylan is sort of in that place where he's been brought into this endeavor, and he has, as it's mentioned later, he agreed to help begrudgingly, more because he just didn't really have anything else to do or anywhere else to go. And I think that there was a little part of him that hoped, if he were part of the crew that outwitted his father, that maybe that would actually credit him in his father's eyes somehow. Basically, Wylan's running out of ideas, but he still craves his father's approval, whether he wants to admit that to himself or not. So there is a sense in the beginning, in the first book especially, of Wylan looking around at the rest of the crew and feeling like he's not one of them. He doesn't really understand where a lot of them are coming from. He doesn't have the same duplicitous turn of mind that they have. He's very talented with ammunitions and explosives and all that, but it's not actually, the mindset isn't there for him. And there's, I think, a part of him that feels a little bit superior due to that. That there's a real sense of, I haven't become quite as depraved as everyone else, without thinking about why these people are depraved in the first place. What has happened to them to make them feel like they cannot trust anybody? What have they gone through to have learned that you can't rely on people? And he, in this chapter, really, really learns that lesson. And it's hard to read. What happened to Kaz was, of course, really difficult to read. But Kaz was the victim of, at first, just terrible circumstance with his parents dying. And then he is the victim of a stranger who swindles him and his brother. Somebody who Kaz and his brother trusted because they were in a position where they had no one. But these weren't people that they had grown to really believe had their best interests at heart, or somebody that they knew in one fashion and then that person slowly began to change and become someone else. What happens with Wylan, it's brutal. Because we see through his eyes how much he watches his father's behavior toward him shift and change. So, okay, let me back up for a sec. Excuse me. Jesper comes with Wylan, and this whole thing starts off, and I gotta say, there was a moment here, most of the time, I really like Kaz's lines, and I really think that he comes across just as badass as we're supposed to see him. Like, I feel like he's a successful character in that we have grown to really trust when he says that he's going to pull off something that seems completely impossible, that he'll be able to do it. Like, there's really not a lot of question in my mind most of the time. There's occasionally the flickers of doubt regarding what's going on with Inej and how he's deciding to handle that. But in terms of his capability and the fact that he is very single-minded most of the time and knows exactly how to stay single-minded, I believe that 100%. But in this section, so why can't we take the Bellant line? Jesper had complained only hours before. It goes past Olendal. The boats on the market line are filthy, and there's never any place to sit. Because you two will stand out on the Bellant line. Here in Ketterdam, you're nothing to look at, but give me one good reason other than farm work, you'd see a shoe and a zemony traipsing around the countryside. Wylan hadn't considered how conspicuous he might be outside the city with his new face, but he was secretly relieved Kaz didn't want them on the Bellant line. It might have been more comfortable, but the memories would have been too much on the day he would finally see where his mother had been laid to rest. So we get to find out exactly what that means a little bit later. Your first priority is to find the quarry and get the other mineral we need for the auric acid. You go to St. Hild if and only if there's time. Wylan felt his chin lift, that simmering, stubborn feeling overtaking him. I need to do this. I've never been to my mother's grave. I'm not leaving Kirch without saying goodbye. Trust me, you care more than she does. How can you say that? Don't you remember your mother and father at all? My mother is Ketterdam. She birthed me in the harbor. And my father is Prophet. I honor him daily. Yo, listen, that is the corniest shit. Stop it, Kaz. All right? Listen, dude, you need to tone it down a little bit. This is a moment that I feel like would have, if those of you who have seen Ocean's 12, there's a moment when the two mains, whose names I'm both forgetting, but George Clooney and the other Baldwin brother he is, right? They're looking in the mirror and he's asking him, are you ready? And the dude says, I was born ready. And then George Clooney sort of turns away from him, nodding like he's taking it really seriously. But as soon as his face is out of the other guy's line of vision, he rolls his eyes. And that's exactly what I picture in this moment, is the two of them nodding like they're very impressed. And then once they turn away, being like, Jesus Christ. And I don't want to feel that way about Kaz. I don't want to feel like he's becoming a parody of himself. So he's going to need to pull back on this a little bit. So I'm going to present a theory here. And guys, maybe I sound a little paranoid, but that's just how these books have become. They make you paranoid. And also, I think it's actually kind of like speaks to the skill of the author in that she has made me believe this is how aware of things, on top of things, and far-seeing Kaz is. I think Kaz is aware that Wylan's mother is alive. And I think that he's setting Wylan up. I think he knows that the chemical Wylan needs is easily available. And he realizes that in order to get Wylan fully on board, he's going to need additional motivation. That Wylan does not think enough of himself to battle against his father for his own sake. And that feels like such a Kaz thing to do. That he knows, he can see that Wylan is not quite all in, and he needs him to be all in. So he decides that he's going to push him that extra little bit by having him discover the full depths of the betrayal of his father, because he knows that that's what's going to push him over the edge. We'll see if I'm right. If I am, I really wonder how long it'll be until I find out that I'm right. And I wonder if Wylan will share with everyone else what he learned. I don't think that Jesper is going to say anything, because Jesper, for all of his bluster and poor behavior, he really does seem to care about Wylan in a real way. And I don't think he'd betray his trust like that unless it was really necessary for people to know. So that's the main question is I feel like Kaz won't show his hand that he knew this, if he did, until Wylan brings it up. And if Wylan doesn't bring it up, it may take quite a while before we actually find out that Kaz knew about this the whole time. Because it's Kaz's business to investigate people, right? And there could very easily be somebody that Kaz is like, finding out about what happened to Wylan's mother. And this place that they've put Wylan's mother is big enough that people may have heard of it. People may know, oh, that's not a graveyard. Like, what are you talking about? That's a hospital, an asylum. So Kaz may have been privy to this information purely by accident. And it's, Wylan's sure not talking to anybody about his mother. He hasn't got friends. He's not going to confide in people. But Kaz has access to networks of information. And I just could really see this sort of thing having been on his radar already. So anyway, Wylan and Jesper are heading out to allegedly get this chemical that he supposedly needs that he can't get anywhere else. We find out that that's not true. He can get it. It's like present in most paints and enamels and things. And the only reason that he said that he had to come here was because he wanted to visit his mother's grave. And as they're heading out there, he and Jesper are talking. And they're talking about Jesper's father. And I'm going to read this. I thought they might search the boat and hold up traffic. Van Eck's already making trouble at the harbors. If he jams up the brow boats, there'll be a riot. The farms need laborers. The plants need workers. The Kirch will only abide so much inconvenience for a rich man's son, especially when there's money to be made. Where does he get all the clothes and uniforms from anyway? Does he just have a giant closet somewhere? So it turns out that these outfits that they're getting, all of these disguises and stuff, are part of the actual opera house wardrobes. And Kaz cuts a secret entrance in there and goes in and just gets stuff and stashes things that aren't from them. Means he can never be caught with a fake Stodwatch uniform or house livery in a raid. So they're talking about this. And then when he says, thanks for coming, Jesper's basically like, listen, I owe you. You came with me to see my dad. When he started asking questions, you basically lied for me. And Wylan admits that he doesn't like lying. And it says Wylan didn't really know why he'd made up that crazy story about luring Jesper into a bad investment. He hadn't even been totally sure what he was going to say when he opened his mouth. He couldn't stand to see Jesper, confident, smiling Jesper, with that lost look on his face, or the terrible mix of hope and fear in Colm Fahey's eyes as he waited for an answer from his son. It reminded Wylan too much of the way his own father had looked at him back when he still believed Wylan could be cured or fixed. He didn't want to see the expression in Jesper's father's eyes change from worry to anguish to anger. I'm making a habit of rescuing you for exercise. And Jesper says that he should have gone to see him that day, but that he just doesn't know what to say to him. And Wylan's like, you can't run from this forever. And Jesper just says, watch me. So they're heading out and they're talking about exactly what happened to Wylan's mother. I think I remember sitting at the piano bench with her, but it might have been a nanny. One day she was sick and going to the country so her lungs could recover, and then she was gone. My father told me she'd been buried at the hospital. That was all. We just stopped talking about her. He said it didn't pay to dwell on the past. I don't know. I think he really loved her. They fought all the time, sometimes about me, but I remember them laughing a lot together, too. I'd have trouble imagining your father laughing, even smiling, unless he's rubbing his hands together and cackling over a pile of gold. He isn't evil. He tried to kill you. No, he destroyed our ship. Killing me would have been an added benefit. That wasn't entirely true, of course. Jesper wasn't the only one trying to keep a step ahead of his demons. Oh, then you're absolutely right, said Jesper. Not evil at all. I'm sure he also had good reasons for not letting you grieve for your mother. So, at this point, Wylan says, it wasn't all his fault. My father seemed sad most of the time and far away. That was around the time he realized I wasn't what he'd hoped for. And this is when I started to be like, yeah, all right. I have a feeling that his mother isn't gone. I wasn't really sure what I was going to find, but this was approximately what I was expecting. So then he talks about how he tried to fake being able to read by having other people read aloud to him and memorizing exactly not only what they were reading, but when they paused, when they would turn the page, just all of it. He really tried to, and he was able to do that by setting their words to music in his head, which just goes to show how incredibly brilliant Wylan is in his way. He just has different skill sets, and the fact that they are so outside of what you would need to be a mercher's son makes him a complete failure in his father's eyes. But if he were to have been allowed to actually go to that music school, he could have probably been incredibly successful. And it's such a shame knowing that his father, like, hearing his father make this promise to Wylan that that's where he's heading. There's a moment in my mind where I was like, oh, wow, he actually is recognizing that maybe there's something Wylan can do, and it's just not within, the purview of being like basically an accountant. But he's going to try and explore that. But it turns out, no, he's trying to have his son murdered. He sets his kid up to be killed and mysteriously disappear. And it is incredibly brutal. Like, I knew that his dad was trash. But it really is, I think this is wonderful writing in that by the time we are hanging out with Wylan and his father tries to blow up the ship, yada, 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 that's the second time that Wylan's father has tried to kill him. But we are not aware of that. And Wylan protesting to Jesper that his father isn't all bad is made all the more poignant once we find out that his father tried to kill him once before already in a very direct way. This is something that it's very difficult if you have not been in this place, I think, to understand. But when you are abused and when you are told that you are not worth anything by somebody who is an authority figure that you are taught to trust and love and admire, when they treat you badly, the instinct that we have as people is to blame ourselves and believe them. And this is just, it's so difficult for people who have not experienced that to really understand how you can internalize that talk that has been thrown at you. But I am lucky, my parents were not like this with me. I was encouraged. I was treated very lovingly. This is not something that I have firsthand experience with. But there are still shadows of things that my parents would say in offhand or joking ways that I still have sort of internalized. And they were very good parents in most ways. And yet I still wound up believing some bad things about myself that I've come to realize are not actually true. That even though they were good people who did not intend for me to believe them. So if your parent is actual trash and is totally browbeating you, I can't imagine how much worse it must be and how much more you must believe it. And what's really tough about it is that it can be more than just what they say to you. There can be actions that consistently seem to tell you something. And that is something that I have come across with friends and with partners. Parents that indicated to them that they were not worth caring for. They were not worth feeding. They were not worth taking to the hospital immediately when their arm was broken. I'm getting really emotional because this is my fiance whose parents had him lay on the couch for several hours after breaking his arm so that they could sleep and bring him to the hospital in the morning. This sort of thing really makes you feel like you are not a priority and that you're really more of a pain in the ass for them. So when you have gone through this sort of thing, even when you prove yourself to be a vibrant, talented, caring person who is worth a lot, who has managed to make something of themselves, and everyone around you can see it, you don't believe it. And them constantly telling you makes you feel like they're just trying to make you feel better. They just feel bad for you. And even though they're telling you this, there's still like a huge element of, yeah, okay, sure. There's just a lack of real belief, of being able to seize onto that feeling and really hold it the way that you are holding on to the belief that you are not worth it. So the fact that Wylan is going through what he is, with struggling to come to terms with who his father is, even though he was he was standing on a boat while his father's men wrapped their hands around his throat. He jumped in the water to escape, and they were so eager to make sure that they could prove he was dead that they jumped in after him. Like, this was a very focused attempt on his life. And the whole attempt was shrouded in elaborate lies that his father told him. The whole thing is so incredibly heartbreaking. And the fact that he continues to make excuses for his dad, even after all this, is exactly the proof of how little Wylan cares about himself. So when we get to the asylum and he realizes what his father did to his mom, that is what pushes him over the edge. The way he treated Wylan's mother, that is something that Wylan cannot get past, because he sees his mother's worth. He can't see his own, but his mother, that's a whole other story, and you're not going to fucking get away with this, my friend. And I really like the fact that Leigh Bardugo has made Wylan, even in the few chapters that we've been in his head, I really feel like I get this about him, and it feels really true that he is somebody who needed extra motivation, and he himself would not be sufficient motivation. His own life would not be sufficient motivation, because he never really truly believed how terrible his father was, because he always thought he low-key deserved to die for being such a complete failure, for being defective and useless to his father. He thought, yeah, I want to live and this is unfair, but at the same time, I completely disappointed him and I am subnormal, and it's sort of understandable why he would want to do this. Like, despite how hideous it all is, Wylan is still rationalizing that it's not that terrible. And it's just so awful to see that. And then when it comes to his mom, and we don't actually know exactly how this all went down, but what I suspect happened, and this is what's so I'm dying to know the answer to this, and I'm hazarding like a guess here, but this is just a guess. He's describing to Jesper how his mother suddenly fell ill and was sent away to recover. So I am assuming that she was drugged or poisoned somehow. Now, when she gets to the asylum, part of the paperwork, and I'm going to have to find the exact spot so that I can read this. Let's see. Doesn't look like a church. Oh, right. Can I help you? And then she gives them the file. And let's see. Your mother's alive. He states that she's a victim of hysteria, paranoia, and persecution disorder. So my guess is that she was very rightfully suspicious of her husband, trying to tell people that she thought that he was like tampering with maybe her food, or trying to drug her, or just after her money and looking for a way to get her out of the way. And he used the fact that she was sharing her concerns with people as evidence of her being mentally ill. And then her being in the actual asylum now, but not really still, like, she still doesn't seem to quite be in full control of her faculties. Like, it's a weird moment though, because she is withdrawn and sad and quiet. And at one point the nurse says how she's much more docile today. So I wonder if they gave her a drug that permanently damaged her mind. Maybe he could have used a Grisha to do this, for all I know. And because I feel like the people the only other explanation is that she was drugged to sedate her and make her more pliable. And the people at this asylum are continuing to feed her whatever drug it was that made her this way initially, to sustain the illusion that she is mentally unwell. And in order for me to believe that that's what they're doing, I'd have to believe that this entire asylum is loaded with corrupt, terrible people. And while that's totally possible, I mean, insane asylums have never been known for really their, like, fucking integrity, right? Like, the ethics of how we have handled mentally ill people in the past has always been abysmal. We've treated them as fucking sideshows half the time to make money off of them. But I don't get the feeling from this nurse that she is a bad person who we need to suspect. I feel like she is very sincere and genuine about taking care of this woman. So I think whatever injury was done to his mother either had to have been done initially to be permanent, or she has kind of started to lose it naturally once she has realized her situation. Because nothing is going to make you give up hope and become, like, lost in depression and sadness, like realizing the man that you married has abandoned you, your child has been taken away, and you have been locked somewhere forever because all he cared about was getting access to your money, and when you failed to produce the kind of child he wanted, you were not worth anything to him anymore. So there's a lot there that could be true, and I really, any of it would work for me. I'm not really feeling like I would prefer one or the other, but it's really even more heart-wrenching when he finally sees her. There's this moment, he sees her, and at first he thinks she's too old to be his mother because she just looks terrible. And yeah, she would. And Jesper manages to give the nurse a reason to leave Wylan alone with his mother. And reminder that Wylan still looks like he's Shu, so he does not appear to be, a relation to his mother at all. And that heartbroke me a little because I forgot that, and I expected her to see him and recognize him and for something to happen. And once I was reminded that he doesn't look like himself, I was like, oh God, he can't even tell her who he is or anything. We have an hour before we start the walk back, he said quietly. Talk to her. We don't know what may happen next. This is all we've got. And I really liked that Jesper says that. Jesper can be so flippant and cavalier about everything and just, it's all a joke. But I love that he recognizes the importance of this moment and how fleeting it is. As somebody who has lost a parent, and it was very sudden, I cannot emphasize enough to anybody listening to this how much effort you should put into staying connected to your parents if you have a good relationship with them, as you can. When you get together with them for holidays and birthdays and whatever, take video. Take 1,000 pictures and make sure you are in the picture with them. That is a thing that I hardly have any pictures of me with my father from beyond the age of like 15, 14, maybe even younger. The only photo I have of the two of us together is at my wedding, and he's leading me down the aisle. And it's, I'm divorced now, and it's a bummer that the photos from my wedding are the only photos I have of the two of us together. And you never know, guys. You never know how much time you've got with the people in your life. It is shockingly fragile. And I never expected my father to die as young as he did. He was just the kind of person, while he didn't take great care of himself, it always seemed to be irrelevant. It always felt like he was just so strong-willed that he would live until he was like 110 years old. I really kind of did expect for him to outlive everybody because that just seemed like who he was. And I am made so much more aware after losing him how easy it could be to lose anybody. And it is not uncommon for people to lose groups of family at once. I mean, my father died, and only a month later, my grandmother died. And those, my mom, dad, and grandmother were my family. I have a huge family, but I hardly saw any of them. Those 3 people were who I saw every holiday. Those were the 3 people that I was always around. And I lost 2 of the 3 within the space of a month. You just never know. And I really hope anybody listening to this is actually hearing me. Do yourself a favor. You may only have 5 minutes. Call them anyway. Call them when you're, stopping to get gas. Pick up the phone and chat with them while you're pumping gas. Anything to just make sure that you are checking in and that they know that you give a shit. Just please, please, guys, I'm serious. So he talks to his mother, and she seems to kind of know who he is. He plays the flute for her, and I think that's what does it. Do you like music? He asked. She nodded. Yes, but there isn't much here. He pulled the flute from his shirt. He'd traveled the whole day with it tucked up against his chest like some sort of secret, and it was still warm from his body. He'd planned to play it beside her grave like some kind of idiot. How Kaz would have laughed at him. And I'm like, he wouldn't. Oh, Wylan, you really just don't understand Kaz, which why would you? You don't know his history, but he wouldn't. The first notes were wobbly, but then he got control of his breath. He found the melody, a simple song, one of the first he'd learned. For a moment, she looked as if she was trying to remember where she might have heard it. Then she simply closed her eyes and listened. When he was finished, she said, "Play something cheerful." So he played a Kalish reel and then a Kirch sea shanty that was better suited to the tin whistle. He played every song that came into his head, but nothing mournful, nothing sad. She didn't speak, though occasionally he saw her tap her toe to the music and her lips would move as if she knew the words. At last he put the flute down in his lap. "How long have you been here?" She stayed silent. He leaned forward, seeking some answer in those vague hazel eyes. "What did they do to you?" She laid a gentle hand on his cheek. Her palm felt cool and dry. What did they do to you? He couldn't tell if it was a challenge or if she was just repeating his words. Yeah, she fucking knows who he is. Yep, that music was the thing that did it. She recognizes her son, like, looks or not. And this is something that I have heard many parents who are connected to their children that they would say this is totally possible. That there is just something that connects a mother to her kids that they would just, looks aside, be able to tell. Say goodbye, Miss Hendricks, urged the nurse. Maria's lips moved, but this time Wylan was close enough to hear what she muttered. Van Eck. So she's correcting the nurse. She remembers her real name. And on the way out, the nurse asks if they would like to see the paintings that Maria has done. And she takes them to this huge closet filled with paintings because she does so many of them that they actually have to throw some of them out eventually. There's just not room to hold on to them. Wylan felt his knees buckle and had to grab the wall for balance. He wanted to scream. The closet was crammed with paintings, landscapes, different views of the hospital grounds, a lake in sun and shadow, and there, repeated again and again, was the face of a little boy with ruddy curls and bright blue eyes. He must have made some kind of noise, because the nurse turned to him. "Oh, dear," she said to Jesper. "Your friend's gone quite pale again. Perhaps a stimulant?" No, said Jesper, putting his arm around Wylan. "But we really should be going. It's been a most enlightening visit." Yeah. So they head out, and Jesper says it's okay, and Wylan says, "No, it's not." "You're right. It's not. It's rotten, and I'd like to string your father up in a barren field and let the vultures have at him." And Wylan, which this is so completely in character, blames himself for this. "You don't understand. It was me. I caused this. He wanted a new wife. He wanted an heir. A real heir, not a moron who can barely spell his own name." He'd been 8 when his mother had been sent away. He didn't have to wonder anymore. That was when his father had given up on him. "Hey," Jesper said, giving him a shake. "Hey! Your father could have made a lot of choices when he found out you couldn't read. Hell, he could have said you were blind, or that you had trouble with your vision. Or better yet, he could have just been happy about the fact that he had a genius for a son." "I'm not a genius." "You're stupid about a lot of things, Wylan, but you are not stupid. And if I ever hear you call yourself a moron again, I'm going to tell Matthias you tried to kiss Nina with tongue. Normal people don't wall their wives up in insane asylums. They don't disinherit their sons because they didn't get the child they wanted. You think my dad wanted a mess like me for a kid? You didn't cause this. This happened because your father is a monster dressed up in a quality suit." Wylan pressed the heels of his hands to his swollen eyes. "That's all true, and none of it makes me feel any better." Jesper gave his shoulder another little shake. "Well, how about this? Kaz is going to tear your father's damn life apart." Wylan was about to say that didn't help either, but he hesitated. Kaz Brecker was the most brutal, vengeful creature Wylan had ever encountered, and he'd sworn he was going to destroy Jan Van Eck. The thought felt like cool water cascading over the hot, shameful feelings of helplessness he'd been carrying with him for so long. Nothing could make this right, ever, but Kaz could make his father's life very wrong, and Wylan would be rich. He could take his mother from this place. They could go somewhere warm. He could put her in front of a piano, get her to play, take her somewhere full of bright colors and beautiful sounds. They could go to Novya Zem. They could go anywhere. Wylan lifted his head and wiped away his tears. "Actually, that helps a lot." Jesper grinned. "I thought it might. But if we don't get back on that boat to Ketterdam, no righteous comeuppance." Wylan rose, suddenly eager to return to the city, to help bring Kaz's plan to life. He'd gone to the ice court reluctantly. He'd aided Kaz grudgingly, because through all of it, he'd believed that he deserved his father's contempt. And now he could admit that somewhere, in some buried place, he'd hoped there might still be a way back to his father's good favor. Well, his father could keep that good favor and see what it brought him when Kaz Brecker was finished. "Come on," he said. "Let's go steal all my dad's money." "Isn't it your money?" "Okay, let's go steal it back." They headed off at a run. "I love a little righteous comeuppance," said Jesper. "Jogs the liver," which is what the driver of the wagon said when they were like hitting every pothole and wanted to die on the way up to the asylum. So I just loved this chapter. I just loved it. Like, we've had a lot of reveals of different characters and their motivations and what's happened to them in the past, but none of them has felt quite as true and organic to me as Wylan. I'm not sure if it's simply because of how what happened to everybody else is so very dramatic in certain ways. You know, both his parents died, and then he has to go to this like strange city with his brother alone, and then they're taken for all their worth, and then they wind up on a barge with dead bodies, and it's all just quite a lot. What happens with Inej? You know, she's like stolen by slavers and made to be a sex slave in a brothel, and like what goes on with her is just so much. Wylan's story feels a little bit more relatable because you can easily tone down what happened to him to be on par with things that have happened to people you know. Wylan being, what's the word I'm looking for? Disowned by his father, to the point that his father would like his men to kill him and pretend that he never had a son, is something that you can easily see having happened to somebody who's gay or trans by a parent today. I do not doubt that there are parents out there who have tried to have their queer kids killed or somehow just removed from the picture. I would be less than unsurprised. It is a full expectation of mine that there are parents out there who have done this. And because of the simplicity of that, my kid is not what I wanted, and therefore I do not want my kid. That is just a tale as old as time. That is something that I like, not that being captured by slavers and, you know, sex trafficking is very much a thing today, but I personally don't know people that's happened to. I do personally know people whose parents have abandoned them and disowned them. And to be lied to and told that your mother is dead or that she abandoned you when that's not actually what happened, I don't know people that has happened to, but I could see it being another layer to a character who would do what Wylan's father did to him. There's something that feels a lot more close to home with his story. And I think part of it is that I wasn't expecting to really care about Wylan. So his story coming out of left field like this really caught me off guard, because I thought whatever I found out about him, that I was just going to be like, all right, well, you know, I like Wylan, this is fine. But this has just really given me some insight into him that I didn't think would matter as much as it turns out to. So, okay, that's the end of that chapter. And then we have chapter 15, which is Matthias. And it turns out that I was correct about Zoya, and seeing that, first of all, Nina has been missing for ages. So the fact that, like, she is suddenly back, Zoya fully expects Nina to come back under her command, basically. She's like, you were missing in action, and now you're back. I was your commanding officer. I am still your commanding officer, and you are going to do what I say. And Matthias has to kind of encourage Nina to be like, listen, because he sees her being berated by Zoya and a little bit by, what's the name of the woman who trained her? Genya. Right. He sees Nina in a new light and recognizes it here. You were throwing a tantrum, said Zoya, stomping away from camp with all the caution of a wayward moose. To Matthias's surprise, Nina actually winced like a child taking a scolding. He didn't think he'd ever seen her embarrassed before. We thought you were dead, Genya said. She looks half dead. She looks fine. You vanished, Zoya spat. When we heard there were Fjerdans nearby, we feared the worst. The worst happened, Nina said, and then it happened some more. She took Matthias's hand, but here we are now. So, this whole thing, the way that Matthias sees how Nina sort of shrinks in front of them, it's so familiar to him because he remembers what it was like for him to come back into the presence of other Druscale and his old commanding officer and know that he has disappointed them. Even though in his mind he has left this life behind, you don't just lose the desire to please people in authority even when you no longer want to be what you wanted to be when they were training you. So I love the fact that he sees this happening and immediately understands viscerally what Nina is going through and is standing up for her. So Nina summarizes what was happening. I was taken captive by the Druscale. Matthias helped me escape. Matthias was taken captive by the Kirch. I helped him escape. I was taken captive by Jarl Broom. Matthias helped me escape. Jarl Broom? Zoya said in horror. Nina sighed. It's been a rough year. I swear I'll explain it all to you. And when she tells them that she took Parem, they at first don't want to believe her. And that's why she has to tell them what exactly was happening here. And she explains to them about how they have a ship and she wants to get Grisha out of here because they're being captured. And initially they're both yeah, we have ships too and they can't leave. So what good is a fucking ship? Until she tells them our ship belongs to a member of the Merchant Council. Zoya and Genya exchanged a glance. All right, Zenik, said Zoya. Now I'm listening. So they talk to each other and they decide that they are going to have some time off to themselves, Zoya and Genya, to talk over this and decide whether or not they want to go through with it, because it's super risky, understandably. Meanwhile, Matthias and Nina are alone. And he's asking her, he says, the spies from Ravka are supposed to be really good. And if they are, your friends are going to find out really quick that we were the ones who broke Kuei out of the ice court. Because she has not told them about that part of everything. And she assures Matthias that she is intending to tell them everything. She really will, she says. But I need to give them some time to get used to this idea, because otherwise they're just going to want to kill Kuei out of hand, and I don't want that to happen. He needs to be safely on Ravkin soil and not somewhere where somebody else could get a hold of him, because that will be considered too great a risk, because he's the key to making more of this drug. So as far as she's concerned, unless the Ravkins are in possession of him, he is too big a risk, and they'll be happy to kill him. And Matthias himself is kind of thinking, I don't really know if having him on Ravkin soil is going to save him, but she says that she thinks it's the safest place for him. Just what does Zoya Nazialensky's protection look like? She's really not that bad. Matthias shot her a skeptical look. Actually, she's terrible, but she and Genya saw a lot of death in the Civil War. I don't believe they want more bloodshed. Matthias hoped that was true, but even if it was, he wasn't sure it would matter. Do you remember what you said to me, Nina? You wished King Nikolai would march north and raze everything in his path. You had a right to your anger. We all do. That's the problem. Brum won't stop. The Druscale won't stop. They consider it their holy mission to destroy your kind. Then we'll find a way to change their minds. All of them. So she changes the subject and mentions how he used a dusk bomb and wants to know why. And he's like, I couldn't rely on you using your power because obviously the Parem has done something. So I brought it as backup just in case, so that I could fight without hurting you. And at this point, she asks Matthias, why haven't you kissed me? Now, I have to admit that this change in subject is suspicious to me. The whole way this goes is suspicious to me. I want to know why this moment is when she chooses to seduce him and distract him. I feel like something is up here, but I don't know what. I don't know that there's anything on his person that she could be trying to steal that he wouldn't have just given her if she'd asked. I don't think there was something in the room happening that he couldn't see that she was trying to keep him from seeing. But there's something weird here. But what we're supposed to think, and I'm willing to believe it, but I'm too suspicious, guys. When she says, you brought it in case we had trouble with Grisha. Why haven't you kissed me? Is it because of what I am? Is it because you still fear me? And this is interesting because there's a moment later, I'm trying to find it because I highlighted it. So I thought, and I can't actually find the moment because I'm not sure if it actually synced with my, my Kindle on the desktop. But there is a moment where Matthias thinks to himself about how, even after all of this, he does not trust the Grisha. And that he knows at this point that this is a conditioned response. He knows that this is a prejudice that is unfair to the Grisha and has been drummed into his mind by corrupt people who are not to be trusted. And yet, he cannot help feeling this way. And I really, really liked this because it's such a nice little lesson in how hard it is for us to unlearn our prejudices. It is an ongoing process and it's a constant battle. It's something that, whether we're talking about race or sexuality or even body image and size, I am trying so hard to learn body positivity, but that is not to say that I don't see a picture of somebody heavy and my first thought is, oh dear. And I have to catch myself and be like, holy shit, stop it. What is wrong with you? But the initial reaction is what we are conditioned to think. And it's how we follow up on that conditioning that really matters. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not good at the follow-up. They don't try to follow up. So finally, she gets him to admit that he wanted to court her and be really, he wanted to be formal about it. And that's why he hasn't kissed her. So finally, she gets him to kiss her. And it's actually a pretty good first kiss. It's described really well. And the chapter ends with Zoya and Genya agreeing to their terms and Nina getting a tablet that is poison from one of the other soldiers who's like, oh, I can just get another one, because they all have basically a agreement that if they get captured, they're not going to be used. So they are going to kill themselves rather than be fed Parem and, be used against their fellow Grisha. And unfortunately, I am out of time. So next time, I'm going to have to talk about Matthias and his wolf. My apologies. I talked too long about Wylan, but I really, really liked that chapter. So I promise next time I will start off by talking about Matthias and his wolf, because that was really good. I enjoyed that a lot, and it was a little heart-wrenching. So my apologies to Jill for going over time, but I promise I'll get to it. And thank you all so much for listening. I hope that you're enjoying the coverage, and I will see you again soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Unspoiled Network podcast.